Aaron, it is great to be here on the set with you at Network.
Yep.
I'm really excited to speak with you about all the things that you're doing on your new business venture, which a lot of individuals out there are saying is like the home shopping network and QVC for Generation Z and young millennials. But before we get into Network, let's talk about your upbringings. You're an LA native. Yep. We're right here in Hollywood. I read recently that you will live and die in LA your whole life. So as an LA native, speak to your upbringings, how you got involved into the hip hop scene and streetwear.
From the Valley, grew up my whole life here, still live here. Never really went away to college or went away for a job, so I've just kind of always been here. And you know, LA is a melting pot, much like New York is for a lot of different things. I grew up particularly interested in hip hop and graffiti. Graffiti led me to an interest in graphic design, which kind of led me an interest in designing t-shirts and things like that, which in 1999 led me to an internship at a LA streetwear company called GAT, which is kind of like one of the original kind of LA streetwear brands that started in '89. There was kind of like Fresh Jive, X Large, GAT, all kind of coming out in 1989. And I was lucky enough to have the owner of that company take me under his wing as probably back then a 17 or 18-year-old kid. And you know, it was that experience that kind of got me my foot in the door in the industry and my interest in streetwear. And you know, the rest is kind of, you know, that was my pathway in. You
started off as a graffiti artist. Were you out tagging in the arts district in downtown LA?
No, I mean, I was a writer. I wouldn't consider myself to be very good. A lot of my friends were really fucking good, but I was just something I was interested in. That's why I kind of transitioned to graphic design and kind of found a way to get good at that and found a way to make a living out of doing that. But, you know, I did spend a little bit of time doing illegal work and got arrested a couple times and figured that was done with that part of my life.
Now let's break that down.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of, you know, millennials, Generation Z that might be watching this interview right now, and that part might resonate with them. The illegal part, getting arrested. Like, how does one come back from getting in trouble with the law at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky that, you know, I didn't spend any actual hard time in jail or prison. I got lucky, you know, like it was kind of some juvenile delinquent, you know, slap on the wrist from a sheriff, did 200 hours of community service, you know, stuff like that, expunged from your record when you get older. So, you know, I got off lucky. I know people that did multiple years in prison for, you know, committing felony vandalism, right? And, you know, the laws used to be harsher, and there's obviously people who are in jail right now for possession and distribution of marijuana, and the laws are changing, right? So at that time, I got lucky, and in the future, maybe those laws will change. But, you know, it definitely taught me, like, hey, I had an interest in creating artwork and design and typography, and then how could I transition my interest there into something that I can make a living off of and do something more positive, which ultimately led me. I saw a lot of my favorite graffiti writers designing t-shirts and doing stuff for this company called GAT, and I was like, okay, well, I see the path, how you can kind of, you know, jump to the next rock and do something more positive with that interest and skill.
Now that professional transition led you to 2003 when you started Agenda.
Yeah.
So speak to Agenda. When
I had that internship at the clothing company, I worked there for many years, working my way up the ranks from design, marketing, sales, kind of learning the whole inside out of the clothing industry. And while doing that, we were going to many different trade shows. Before the ComplexCons and these big consumer-facing events, there used to be events like ASR, Action Sports Retail, that happened in San Diego, California, a big event that still happens in Vegas called Magic, which is like the biggest fashion trade show in the world. And I was working with a small independent brand going to these shows, and we kind of weren't, you know, streetwear wasn't the trend that it is now. It was kind of like the small category that the big shows and retailers kind of didn't care about that much, and we were kind of brushed in the corner. And I looked around at these shows in the early 2000s and said, what is a show? Someone rents a big room, they sublet it out to other people, and they invite buyers. I said, how do I do that? I said, how complicated could that be? And as a 19-year-old, I kind of just opened my mind up and said, I think I can do this. And I decided with my partner at the time, who owned the clothing company GAT, to start the first Agenda trade show in Long Beach, California in 2003. And Agenda before that had been a series of one-night art shows and music that we were doing in our warehouse. And I decided to take that brand we were developing, it's just almost kind of like a fun thing that we did in our spare time, and develop that into a trade show brand. And in January 2003, I invited 30 of my friends' brands, my peers in the industry, kind of up-and-coming streetwear labels, to exhibit with us in a Thai restaurant that I rented out. I charged $500. 250 retailers came up to the show. Me and my grandma and my mom sat in my living room, literally putting labels on postcards, sending out to buyers all over the world pre the show, making phone calls, inviting people. I coded a website and threw it up, and ranging from Bloomingdale's to Fred Siegel to Beams and Ships in Japan, and different magazines showed up to the first one, and it just kind of organically worked in a very small way. And I decided that that business was more interesting for me than the actual clothing business itself, and over the next 2 years I transitioned out of the clothing business to go pursue that full-time as a company.
People, when you're, you know, for lack of a better term, when you're on the come up, when you're broke,
Yeah.
and you're trying to level up, to your point, your friends aren't necessarily there.
Yeah.
The good ones will be there, but the other homies, they kind of go away, and then when they see that you're hanging out with celebrities and you're doing big things, they're like, hey, Aaron, I want to get in this event, or I want to meet this person. So, like, how did you work through those dynamics?
I think I refused to give up in doing anything, and I would say along that, whatever, 7 to 10 year span in the first years in making it successful, I failed multiple times. I just kept going and going and going, and never accepting failure as an option, never accepted giving up. I didn't even have that thought. And like, because, you know, now we get in this startup VC world where it's like people have a burn, and, you know, they run out of money, and they, you know, like, I lived at home at my parents' house till I was 23 years old. I started the company when I was 19. I had a very low cost of overhead. It was me and a couple of my friends and my cousin running the company. You know, there wasn't this idea that there was like a hard stop date. It was like, we just keep going until we make it work, and that was an infinity. And like, you hear, you know, really seasoned executives like Jeff Bezos talking about like playing the long game, right? And, you know, infinite player versus a finite player, right? So without knowing it, I was almost playing the infinite game, that I was going to continue to iterate and go and build and figure this business out until it worked. It wasn't like, I'm giving myself until this summer, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to give up. Like, those thoughts didn't really cross my mind, and just trying and trying until we figured it out. So constant iterating and never having the notion of an end date. I had been friends with, and I consider my mentor, Mark Ecko, who was the founder of Ecko Unlimited, which actually owned Complex Media. And then later years, Complex got sold out. Mark was still involved in the business, and I had approached Mark with an idea to basically turn Complex into the Comic-Con of street culture. And I had written a business plan to do that, and then he loved it, his partners loved it, and we ended up executing against that with my infrastructure, their amazing consumer brand, and how do we put our heads together, kind of 1 + 1 = 10. And that happened in 2015. We had that conversation in probably January, February 2015, and we launched the event in November 2016.
Now, for someone that's not familiar with the term streetwear or street culture, what are you referring to?
That's a great question, because I don't know that anyone really defines it really well. I would say in the late 80s, early 90s, it's the cross-section of skateboarding, hip-hop music, fashion, and graphic design, and like that kind of creating a new genre within the clothing. Because before it used to be like, hey, this is hip-hop urban gear, and this is skate, and this is surf, and like, you know, there's certain brands that kind of were neither here nor there, and it's kind of carved a new section out for themselves. And it's kind of the blending of multiple disciplines, which kind of created this new segment with the streetwear. And even within streetwear today, you have, you know, Stussy to Off-White on the super high-end couture level. I think both will consider themselves a streetwear brand, but there's a lot of shades of gray, and it's a word that can be used and repurposed in many different ways.
Now, follow-up question to that, because I even try to explain this to marketing executives at brands. Why should anyone, I'm just going to throw this out there, why should anyone over the age of, let's just say, 40 care about street culture? When thinking about marketing and business and even investment opportunities.
The obvious reason is it's a massive business. You saw that Farfetch Group purchased New Guards, which is the company that owns Off-White and many other brands, for $750 million this last week. A couple months ago, they purchased Stadium Goods for $250 million, right? There's massive, you know, multi-billion-dollar industry just on a pure business investment level, just understanding this is a rapid market. And the reason it's a big opportunity, because going back to that fandom, the fans that we cater to spend a disproportionate amount of their income every year buying this stuff because they're so passionate about it, and they wear it as a badge of honor, whether it's the sneakers or streetwear, right? And they define themselves by it, and they're willing to spend a crazy premium on buying things. In the same way that people would buy a Rolex as a status symbol, people now have certain sneakers, certain streetwear, certain collectibles on their shelf to show their affluence, or, you know, to relate to other people. And this is a phenomenon that I've seen exist in very few segments of the market.
And let's transition over to network. So last year, you exited from ComplexCon and your company Agenda, and you decided to come over here and be the CEO of Network. Speak to that.
Yeah, for me, I've been in the event space from 2003 to 2018. I felt like I had got my doctorate in events. I'd learned everything I can learn. ComplexCon, working on that was the crowning achievement of my career. And I felt like I wanted to move on. And again, the same way I applied relationships and knowledge from Agenda to ComplexCon, how do I take, again, these brands and market knowledge I have and apply it to something digitally? Because I obviously saw the future as digital. So 3 things I hadn't really done was content, e-commerce, and just technology in general. And I wanted to really master those 3 skills. And coming over to join Network was really an opportunity for me to learn, I thought, kind of the 3 biggest market opportunities for me in the future, and to take all these really amazing, 20 years of brand relationships and market knowledge and apply it to those 3 categories. I thought there was a big opportunity and challenge myself again. And I'm a big fan of thinking about when you're comfortable, you should probably change and make yourself uncomfortable again. And I'm making myself really uncomfortable in this company, which is learning 3 really hard, business disciplines.
It's the best way that we grow, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's speak about what Network is. So again, I mentioned before QVC for Generation Z and for young millennials. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think if you talk to an actual person who consumes our product, I was talking to a well-known young celebrity who's 20 years old the other day, and I told him about, hey, we're QVC for Gen Z, and he said, what's QVC, right? So people don't even know what it is who our actual audience is, but to the business, to the industry, they understand that concept, which is basically personalities selling things over video. So yeah, I think we're bringing that, we're modernizing it. So if they're selling a Kathy Lee Gifford sweater to a 65-year-old in Minnesota who's watching TV, ordering over the telephone, hopefully we're selling a LeBron James sneaker through mobile in-app purchase on a live streaming video on a smartphone to a 15-year-old. We're still putting a personality in a product in a video shoppable environment, but the way we're curating that and delivering on a technology standpoint is very different.
I love it. It's online shopping. So I've signed up for the mobile app. I have it on my phone. Staying on the topic of relationships. So Network recently raised their 2nd round. You have 2 lead investors, one of them being Live Nation.
Yep.
The other one being someone that goes by the name of Drake. So speak to how did you get Drake involved? If it was you're doing, was there a relationship behind the scenes with him? How did Drake get involved with Network?
Yeah, so the Drake relationship came through his manager, Future the Prince, who, if you don't know him, is a really amazing person and a very smart guy. And he and Drake are involved with a private equity fund called Main Street Enterprises, which is an investor network. And through a series of meeting with Future, running down the business, they were excited to get on board and work with us. So that was an exciting partnership. And as well as Live Nation came out at the same time, which I got to meet with Michael Rapino, who's the CEO of Live Nation, is probably one of the most prolific executives in modern day, and has built that to an enormous organization. And it's an honor for me to get to sit with these people and not just pitch them on our idea, but get their insights and get their feedback on the business. So these are really valuable, not just the finances that you raise, right? Because a lot of people can raise finances in this kind of environment where everyone's, again, the Shark Tankification, right? There's a lot of people throwing money around. How do you get really smart people to come along with that money and help you pull this business up, and they give you their valuable insights and experience as well, which I think sometimes is more valuable than the money.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So besides Live Nation and Drake, do you have other celebrities that are looking to get involved with Network, whether from an investment standpoint or just even as talent to have their products on display?
Yeah, our first round of financing also came from Main Street Enterprises, whose investors include Jimmy Iovine, the well-known executive behind Beats by Dre and Interscope Records. He's been a huge help to us, as well as LeBron James and Maverick Carter. So, got some great people behind the company from sports, music, entertainment. And every day, that's all I'm doing is going out and talking to record labels, management companies, artists, athletes, sports leagues, and how we can really help these personalities bring their products to market in a different way than they would in other channels. And that's probably about what I'm spending 50% of my time on, is just talking to people.
Now I'm going to ask you a hard question. I'm sure you've probably been asked this before. So you mentioned Amazon just now.
Yeah.
If Amazon were to come out with their own online shopping network, no pun intended.
They already did.
They already did?
Yeah.
What's it called?
Amazon Live. So they have multiple platforms that they're launching that could be perceived, like, from a platform standpoint, competitive to Network. I don't think anything we're doing technology-wise, Amazon couldn't copy, right? One of the biggest companies in the world, right? It's about relationships with talent, relationships with brands, proprietary content, proprietary products that it's hard for them to copy. They could go and copy-paste Network and try to do their own version. Are they going to get cool Nikes, Are they going to get exclusive Adidas shoes, right? That's the stuff that, you know, goes back to those relationships and the talent that we work with that is hard for people to replicate. Someone could copy and paste and make something look identical to Network, but what are they programming on there? That's the part that's proprietary. It's the offline stuff that's proprietary.
Is the goal then to continue to grow the talent network, or is it to partner with a Facebook, or to have Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's and Ted Baker and Ferragamo and Gucci like hitting you up saying like, hey, our business is really being affected, we want to start partnering with Network?
We want both. You're going to see us roll out a slew of new talent deals, some that are investors, some that we're signing long-term deals with on talent, bringing exclusive products to Network, as well as us working with other retail brands, other direct brands. We want to aggregate, again, anything we think is interesting to our audience. So, you know, and instead of trying to, you know, like a regular retailer, they buy in the spring, summer, fall, holiday collections that are hundreds of pieces per brand. All we do is hone in on the best slivers of each person's collection so we can work with more people in a more focused way.
What I think is really genius, and just putting my marketer hat on for a moment, is the fact that when someone signs up for Network, they are giving you their data. They're signing up, they're giving you a phone number, then they're giving you an email address. When you visit Nordstroms.com, you're not giving either or,
yeah.
So it makes it a lot harder for Nordstrom's to retain that customer's attention unless they're putting tracking pixels on their website and then tracking them all over the internet, including Facebook. So I have to say, like, you guys are definitely multiple leaps and bounds ahead of just traditional retailers from that standpoint.
It's a matter of intent, and I think there's a lot of low intent customers out there, and we're not interested in having those customers. So the people who sign up for Network, have the app on their phone, built an account on their desktop, they really want to be there. They've jumped through the hoop and said, hey, I'm really interested in engaging with this platform. So we can actually choose to have a smaller audience who's much more high intent on buying and watching, rather than these kind of passive people who can just kind of like flip by there for 2 seconds and not be that interested and move on, and simply we're counting that as a customer or counting that as an impression or a view. That doesn't really mean anything for us, right? We're looking for really high intent people, and the hoops that we jump through for Network is necessary.
So I'm curious to know, as we look to wrap up, Aaron, as you're working with different celebrities and talents like Gary Vaynerchuk or OBJ, are you counting on them to bring their, no pun intended, network of followers over to Network? Or are you at a point where you don't necessarily need like their following to come over, it's just icing on the cake, you guys already have enough emails and enough data in terms of phone numbers to get the word out?
It's both. No matter how big we get, we're always going to want more. We work with someone like Gary Vee, who's a real salesman. He's going live from his Instagram, telling his audience to tune off. He walks in the studio live and says, tune off now, go watch me on Network, right? Like, he's driving his audience in mass, and Network has an audience, right? So those are the ideal collaborators, people who want to bring their fans along and want to reach our audience. That's the perfect scenario. But even if someone just wants to reach our audience, we can do both. But we like people who feel good about the value exchange. We have an audience, they have an audience, let's put those audiences together. And my favorite analogy, 1 + 1 = 10.
Absolutely. Aaron, last question for you, and this could be advice for anyone out there watching. It can be where you want to see Network go long term. Anything, open mic, it's all on you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll choose the advice path, which is like, hey, for anyone that's looking to start a company, you asked me in the beginning, like, how did I get Agenda where it was? And, you know, it's like you have to have that long-term vision. You have to be willing not to give up. And like you have to not have a breaking point and be willing to push through like an extreme amount of pain, failure, embarrassment. Like, anyone who has an ego going into something is going to fail. And it's about like putting your personal interest and ego to the side and just pushing through to the point of no return. And then that's when you're going to get there. And that's the thing that separates successful people from unsuccessful people.
And that's real talk.
Yeah.
Aaron, where can viewers out there connect with you? And more importantly, how can they sign up for Network and or reach out to Network for collaboration?
Just on, it's Network NTWRK with no vowels, just at Instagram. That's the main place. You could see the company and you could reach out to me as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right. That's a wrap.